Hello there and welcome back to Good Morning Sri Lanka with this very interesting discussion on the US presidential election coming up on the 6th of November. Now, as you were talking before, Anuradha, there have been several surveys and predictions coming along. I mean, it's not just as to who is ahead, there are predictions as to how the white voters will vote, how the non-white voters will vote, women and men, so much statistics, so much surveying being done. In your experience, is this accurate?
As far as polling is concerned, I'm somebody who doesn't, look to the polls to help me figure out what will happen in the end, because polls generally are, just a snapshot, at that particular moment, what the situation is. But at this particular stage, I think it's important to just take the polls into consideration because we're so close to the election.
Right.
Polling, several months ago, it wasn't too, I don't know, for me personally, I didn't rely too much on the polls. But if you do look at the polls, I personally think you should do, two things. Either, if you're following the elections closely, you should monitor them on a daily basis, because some company will be coming out with a poll pretty much on a daily basis because we're so close to the elections. And also you should look at not just one particular poll, but a place where you can see a compilation of all the different polls that are being conducted nationally, statewide, on the various issues you were talking about with the different segments and so forth. Because when you see a compilation, you can get a better idea of where the situation is.
So I understand that there is no national poll, it's just various companies, various research organizations doing their own.
I mean, what do you mean a national poll? It's not like a state entity doing it. Usually you'll get the Washington Post doing it. These media companies doing it together.
Which also may have vested interest.
But they take the national picture into account. I mean, some will have state, obviously, focus on different states. But these are national level polls. But what you have to keep in mind is sometimes, like we talked about, the news organizations having certain leanings, if you will. Some of these polls do also. And now the latest thing coming from the Republican side is that they're saying these polls aren't inaccurate, they haven't been done properly, and that nobody can believe the polls is the message that they're trying to sort of get out.
Yeah, because I think they are in a bit of trouble as regards with the polls. Of course, do you think the polls really have an impact on the final result? Have you seen that happen? Do people follow the polls and maybe even vote for certain
I mean, it could happen if there was a drastic difference. If you felt like, okay, your candidate was winning, but now all of a sudden this other candidate has gone. Why is that so? What has caused this shift? But we're not seeing that drastic of a change. The polls are still pretty close between Mitt Romney and President Obama.
In fact, that this gap has been one of the closest in pretty recent history, in fact, that the two candidates are pretty close in that, so the polls necessarily don't show us a clear advantage. So
I mean, it's very hard to, we talked about predictions earlier, and it's really difficult to say, okay, we can predict the winner now itself, even though we're really close. It's really hard to do that, because it really varies from, we were talking about those swing states and these particular areas where you have the independents and these types of things that can just go either way, and then all of a sudden change the result.
Now, of course, one of the main reasons that we here in Sri Lanka are talking about the United States presidential election is the crucial role of the US president in the world. That leads us, Anuradha, to the issue of foreign policy, of course a very crucial element in the presidency election itself. What is your opinion on Mitt Romney's ideas against Barack Obama's current foreign policy? For example, the Libyan issue, the Osama bin Laden issue, and the cutting of expenditure on the war. What do you think? Is it correct to say such?
I mean, you can't say if one is correct or the other, depending on your political, personal convictions, I guess. But the difference is that Obama, I think, is going to be using the fact that he has the foreign policy experience now. That he has to speak of that. He can boast about a number of things, but Mitt Romney can also point out some failures in Obama, which he's doing, as you mentioned, the Libya situation, perhaps the derailing of the Israeli-Palestinian peace process and how that's going nowhere. These types of Iran's issue and how that's sort of being, getting into a no-win situation, sort of. So Mitt Romney has a lot of things that he can use against Obama as failures. As far as Mitt Romney's positions are concerned, I mean, obviously he is in the Iran issue, the Israeli-Palestinian issue. He's not, in the same line of thinking as the Democratic side, so he can argue those points for himself. But then he doesn't have the foreign policy experience as such, and neither does his vice presidential candidate, Paul Ryan, which is what the Democratic side is saying. And then he had a couple of mess-ups, with the response to the Libyan situation and then the London Olympics issue, what happened in his conversation with the Prime Minister there. And so he has had some of these drawbacks, but what Democrats are saying is they don't have foreign policy, they don't know how to go about relations with foreign countries. And then what the Republicans are saying is, well, you've screwed it up. You've had the chance and you haven't really done that well.
In fact, coming to Paul Ryan quickly, because I remember John McCain's campaign and how there's a movie also, The Game Change. The Game Change happened with Sarah Palin. Paul Ryan has just been a little, something like a little boy who came and became the vice president. Not much of an impact, no game change from him really.
Well, actually, I'm not sure if I agree with you in that sense, because I actually watched Game Change recently just to, refresh my memory and all that, and it was interesting. I don't know, I could be completely wrong, but I see sort of maybe a same kind of scenario cropping up. They wanted to do a game change in a sense with the pick of Paul Ryan. He was young, you could appeal to the younger demographic, and he was popular in the Republican Party, and also he had even more add to the economic credentials that Romney has, which was his big budget plan, which was well supported by the Republicans, and he was known as this budget person, so he had that know-how and intellect and so forth to add to this campaign that was focused on the economy. So that's what they were trying to do, but then now we're seeing whether that might not have been such a
I think his experience in the political situation on the spotlight has probably laid him bare slightly.
And then also the other thing is this thing that the Democrats are trying to say against the Republicans, that they're out of touch, with the general voter, the middle class. Paul Ryan might be adding to that.
Coming back to foreign policy again, what do Americans expect? Do they want to be the leaders of the world, be exceptional, have everything their way, or do they now want to be part of the world? What do they expect from this current leader to bring to the table?
Well, I do think, you talked about exceptionalism early when we were chatting, and that's a part of patriotism, I think. Nobody wants to think of this, Americans, I'm saying, nobody wants to think of them as not being exceptional. They want to think of themselves as an exceptional country, so I don't think any of the candidates are going to argue against that. But whether you need to work with other countries in, foreign policy issues or not, I think that's where sort of the divisions are, between the Republican Party and the Democrats.
I think Romney has a more aggressive sense of nationalism, sort of Bush-like. I hope not as worse, not as bad. But Obama, I think, has tried to manage the two sides, and I think he's messed up a little. Currently, America's position as the world leader is being challenged by many other states, isn't it?
I guess, that has different interpretations,
Okay. I think we unfortunately don't have some time to discuss, but indeed, Anuradha, thank you. It's a pleasure having you, and a wonderful insight to the presidential elections, and as we follow up on Good Morning Sri Lanka. So that is all for today on Thursday on Good Morning Sri Lanka, and we'll see you tomorrow bright and early. See you.